You know that quiet hum? That gentle drift of your mind when you're not really focused on anything in particular? Maybe you're staring at a window or you're on a walk and your thoughts just start to wander. It's this super universal human experience, right? This rich inner world we all have. But have you ever stopped and wondered what is actually happening inside your brain in those moments? For the longest time, we've kind of just dismissed that internal chatter as, daydreaming. Maybe you even felt a little guilty, like you should be more on task. Well, it turns out that inner space, that hum, is actually a specific brain network kicking into gear. It's called the default mode network, or DMN, and I think our entire relationship with it is about to change. Okay, so let's define our terms here. For decades, the DMN has gotten a pretty bad rap. Clinically, it's been tied to things like rumination, when your thoughts get stuck in a loop, and it's also linked to depression and even getting stuck in old trauma patterns. It's basically been seen as a problem to be solved, a kind of glitch in the system that we need to control. But what if that's all wrong? Today, we are going to completely flip that script. We're diving into some really mind-bending insights that reframe this whole thing. We're going to explore how what was once seen as a malfunction might actually be a sacred doorway, a pathway to deep transformation that weaves together the latest neuroscience with some really ancient wisdom. And this slide really lays out the two opposing views. The old narrative, it's a glitch. It's the source of anxiety, a problem to be fixed. But this new spiral perspective sees it completely differently. It suggests the DMN isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's a vital threshold, a sacred passage where the ego can start to dissolve, allowing for this profound inner journey. It's not a dysfunction. It's a doorway to be honored. So what happens when we actually walk through that doorway? Well, it's like the veil gets thinner. First, the DMN's constant chatter starts to quiet down. This can happen in deep meditation or through other intense experiences. And as that inner narrator gets quieter, the rigid boundary between you and everything else starts to get fuzzy. It dissolves. That's when this incredible sense of unity can emerge. And finally, you might get a glimpse of the spiral, the deep interconnected patterns of reality itself. And the craziest part? This isn't just poetry, it's something we can actually measure happening in the brain. Here's a beautiful way to think about it. The DMN as a sacred cocoon. Think about a caterpillar in its chrysalis. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. It's just still. But inside, this radical, chaotic, complete transformation is underway. The DMN, in this view, is our cocoon. It's the quiet, internal space we need to enter for our own metamorphosis to happen. And that leads to a really crucial warning. It's a warning against what some people call spiritual bypassing, trying to get to the good stuff too fast. Think about that butterfly. If you help it out of the cocoon, you're not actually helping it. That struggle is what builds the strength in its wings. Without it, it can't fly. Rushing an inner process, trying to fix it before it's ready, can leave us without the strength we need for the next stage of our lives. And that idea builds perfectly into this next metaphor, the DMN as a temple threshold. It's the boundary line, the ceremonial gate between our normal, everyday self and the vast, sacred reality of our deeper nature. When we start to see it this way, what once felt like a problem starts to feel more like an initiation. What's so wild is that this journey is nothing new. Humans have been navigating this territory for thousands of years, and they left us maps. Those maps are our myths. They aren't just fairy tales. They are symbolic blueprints for consciousness, all telling a similar story about the need to break down before we can be reborn. The pattern is just everywhere you look. You have the Sumerian goddess Inanna, who has to surrender everything she has at 7 gates before she can be reborn. You have Orpheus in the underworld, who fails because he looks back too soon, a perfect myth about not rushing the process. You have the death and resurrection of Christ, the trials of Psyche. They all point to the same deep truth. The old self has to fall away for something new and more whole to emerge. And this brings us to a really critical point about our modern world. We have a tendency to pathologize this whole journey of descent. What ancient cultures might have honored as melancholia, a necessary time for deep, soulful reflection, we often slap with a label of clinical depression. Sacred solitude becomes pathological withdrawal. That inner spiraling becomes obsession. By trying to fix these states, we might be accidentally blocking our own transformation. This reframes so much of what we go through, doesn't it? That job transition that feels like a total failure, a relationship ending that just shatters you, a health scare that makes you question everything. Maybe these aren't just breakdowns. Maybe they're the start of a breakthrough. They are the modern world's version of a mythic descent, the gateways to a deeper way of being. Okay, so let's spiral back from myth to modern science, because this is where it gets truly amazing. Neuroscience is now actually mapping the biology behind these exact states. We're not just talking philosophy anymore. We can see the neural signatures grounding these ancient ideas in measurable, physical changes in the brain. So in our normal, everyday state of consciousness, the DMN is the star of the show. Look at that. It takes up a whopping 40% of the brain's activity. Our inner storyteller is running things a lot of the time. But this all changes, dramatically changes, during these transformative states. And here's the number to prove it. In studies on deep meditation or psychedelic experiences, researchers see, on average, a 40% drop in DMN activity. That's not a small tweak, that's a massive shift. And this measurable quieting of our inner narrator lines up perfectly with people's reports of their ego dissolving and feeling a sense of oneness. And look at what happens when the DMN steps back. In our normal state, the DMN is high and the different brain networks are pretty siloed. But as the DMN gets quieter, something incredible happens. The rest of the brain starts talking to itself more. Overall brain connectivity actually goes up. The old hierarchies break down, and parts of the brain that almost never communicate suddenly light up together. So that experience of unity isn't just a feeling. It's a real, measurable, whole brain event. You get this massive increase in connectivity, changes in brain waves, and a kind of neural reset that shakes up rigid old ways of thinking. And to top it all off, these states flood the brain with compounds like BDNF, which is like miracle grow for your neurons, opening up this incredible window for deep learning and change. Okay, this is all profound, mind-blowing stuff, but what do we actually do with it? How does this become more than just a cool idea? Let's get practical. How do we prepare for these experiences? And just as important, how do we bring the wisdom back into our real, everyday lives? If you feel called to explore these inner worlds, preparation is everything. First, know your why. Set a clear intention. Second, create a safe container, both physically and emotionally. Third, have your grounding practices ready, anchors to help you return. Fourth, and this is so important, find guides who understand the territory and won't try to pull you out of the cocoon too early. And finally, study the maps. Learn from the myths, learn from the science, know what you're getting into. And after the journey, how do you know it worked? How can you tell if it was a real transformation? Well, the signs aren't about having a cool story to tell. They show up in your life. Things like being more compassionate with yourself and others, seeing the world more clearly, embodying wisdom instead of just talking about it, being more calm and steady, finding magic in the most ordinary things, and maybe most importantly, having a sense of humor and lightness about it all. And this brings us to what the great mythologist Joseph Campbell called the hero's return. Because the journey isn't just for you. It doesn't end with your own personal aha moment. The final critical stage is to bring that wisdom, that boon, back to your community. The transformation becomes complete when it's shared and contributes to the whole. All right, let's zoom all the way out for our final thought. Let's get planetary with it. What if everything we've been talking about on a personal level is also happening to humanity as a whole? What if our entire species is in a kind of global cocoon right now? What if all the crises we see are the contractions before a new kind of consciousness is born? Just think about it. Our collective DMN, the shared stories, the beliefs, the identities that have defined us, is being completely shaken up. Global challenges are forcing us to see how interconnected we are, dissolving old boundaries. This might not just be chaos and collapse. It could be a planetary metamorphosis, a necessary breakdown that comes before a breakthrough to a more integrated awareness. But it really requires our conscious participation. So we'll leave you with this final question to carry with you. A question to maybe ask yourself next time you feel that inner hum. What if your greatest strength, your most profound wisdom, isn't found in climbing higher or pushing harder, but is actually hidden in your willingness to go down? To consciously descend into that sacred, quiet, and transformative space within. That is the invitation of the spiral.